Hello, everybody. This is Lee Carroll, and this is another Streaming with Lee. And this time it is very, very different, and I get very excited for numbers of reasons, because finally I'm going to get a show about something that Cryon has said, some of the developments that are taking place, and it would appear to be a science show. It really isn't. We'll call it a futurist show, if you'd like to, because what we're going to reveal today is, the reason it's exciting is it real or is it fake? The things that Cryon has discussed and talked about regarding our future. And specifically, the future with electricity, with magnets, with water. This has been probably the theme of Cryon for a decade. Now, it started slow, but in the last few years, Cryon has accelerated all of the talk and gotten very specific about the future of magnetics. Now, what would that future be? Cryon said specifically, and let me give you the bottom line, is the elimination of the electronic grid for cities, the desalinization of seawater, and also the use of magnetics within regular water. He said magnetics has properties that you haven't discovered yet that will push and pull things in ways that you will love, that will eliminate the whole reason for diesel fuel, all of these things. It's equivalent to what many are calling free energy. Doesn't exist. Ask a physicist. There's always a price to pay. But it doesn't appear to when you use magnetics. It's a force that is there, available, and forever. We're going to talk about that as well. But even before we go there, and even before I tell you any of the things that Cryon has said, and I want to introduce who we're going to meet today. And his name is Colin McClive, and he is coming to you from Connecticut. Colin, are you there?
I am here.
I want you to right now. Just you're going to talk some science, and we're going to go into things that people's mouths are going to drop open in a little bit. How did we link up? Where did you understand that that you read Cryon and all these things, and you were also a host in that area of the Cryon seminars. How did this all happen for you?
So in August of 2016, a very close friend of mine introduced me to the Cryon material, and I was intrigued. I was more than intrigued. I was just so happy to find this, and I dove right into it, read all of Monica Moragni's books, and then in February of 2018 or 2017, I noticed that you all were looking for hosts in Connecticut, and I called up the organization. I said, I can do that, and hosted you in August of 2017, and that's how it started. So it was kind of a fun way to get to, and I loved your comment to me, which was, hey, there's one way to meet me in person. Host me.
Yes, and it worked. How many times have you hosted there now?
Twice.
2 times. Well, it's going to happen again, of course, and we love the East Coast and all that. Now, right now, of course, we are kind of hunkered down. I'm in California, and you're at home in Connecticut, and we're doing this show together, long distance, and it's going to be quite a revelation, especially for those who have doubted some of the things that Cryon has said.
Yep.
Let me talk for a moment. Even before I go into what Cryon has said and throw it to you to start giving information about the reality of some of these things, is that we just did a stream. In fact, it was yesterday. We streamed from Berkeley Springs. Now, we didn't stream from it. We're in California. But John Peterson, the Arlington Institute, is a futurist. And he gave us a talk online on Sunday regarding what he does and what futurists do and all. And he remarked that there were places in history that actually then you cannot predict, but they'd change history. So it's really very tough to be a futurist unless you kind of plan for things that you think might happen. And so he talked about a computer model that goes many, many ways and is very, very complex and kind of allows for these kinds of things. However, right now, I'm also hearing predictions of the future that are pretty dire, and they're all based upon this whole principle that John supplied us when he showed us a fish named Fred, I think it was. And that fish in that tank, he said, is us. He said, the fish only knows what it knows, and it knows about the environment is in. He said, for the fish, he said that his food falls from the sky every day in the tank, and he swims around and is aquatic, and he sees a plant. And he said, if you could ask the fish what the future is, it would probably be, more food, a different color, and a better plant. In other words, the fish cannot understand anything that it has not seen. Now, Cryon's theme has always been this: don't project the future based upon the past. But it takes a wild card or something extremely different in order to sweep up and change the future. And then John showed those things, and he says, going from horses to cars, going to computers, electricity and all, it changed absolutely everything about the future. So why am I telling you this? And the reason is we are there. And what you're about to see today can very well change any model of any futurist because of what is about to take place. Now, Cryon has given us the hints about what it was, but not when. We are in unique times. And if I tell you that these unique times, it's when, right now. Before you're done with this program, I'm going to show and tell, along with Colin, things that you didn't expect. And they are not for the future. They are now. And what we're going to show you is what Cryon has said, epitomized, manifested, and is starting in a hybrid fashion right this minute, installed and working. What this is going to do for our future is change everything. It's going to change that which is, you think, is marginal. What if I told you it's going to be the end of batteries? Now, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but this is one of Cryon's predictions. Well, how can that be? You need the batteries to store the electricity. If you went to a photographer's convention 50 years ago, 50 years ago, I had my first camera. It was a Pentax, and we were so involved in the new films that were coming around, and suddenly we had this sensitive film called the ASA 800, and it was great. What if I told that convention, I'm going back in time and saying, excuse me, there won't be any film in 50 years. And they're going to look at you in stunned silence and say, well, what's going to replace it? What could possibly replace it? They don't know what they don't know. And this is what I'm going to show you even today. You're not going to expect what you're about to see. You're going to see things that are in development, and even the hybrids of what Cryon has talked about are going to revolutionize everything everywhere. You think I'm being over dramatic? Wait, you decide. Here's what Cryon has said, just in a nutshell. Number one, it's going to get colder. That is controversial. We're headed for another cycle that we've seen before. You can call it a mini ice age if you want to. It's not going to be dangerous except for those in cold areas. It's going to get much colder. And the ones that are suffering now are the ones that are realizing that the grid, that electric grid we have, is not sufficient. It's not robust. In fact, did you know in California we have rolling blackouts, and we don't even have cold weather, not real cold weather, not like Colin has, like in Connecticut, or not like in Wisconsin and Dakota and Canada, for instance. It gets so cold there, you're going to have the grid fail, and it has in the past. And what happens is people perish. And so you need a way to create electricity that is not with the grid. Now, Cryon has been talking about this, so let me just go to the basics. Have you ever played with magnets? I hope so. You realize that there is power there, and I mean really power. Use it force. You can have static magnets. I'm a nerd, so I used to play with them as a kid. These are magnets, about this big, that are so powerful, they'll come together, and you get your finger out of the way, you'll mash your finger. And they want to come together. A grown man, even a muscle guy, has trouble pushing together two magnets this size. Can't push them together because they will repel each other if you have the polarity correct. Or they'll attract each other so hard that you can't even pull them apart. Now, here's the point. You say, so what? Play with magnets. Here's the point. If you do that and you come back in 4,000 years, it's the same. In other words, it never goes away. Magnetism is force and it's power. Why aren't we using it in an array where it will push and pull itself very cleverly in a machine so that it will spin? And if it spins on a regular basis like this, what's going to happen is you can create electricity. Here's where Cryon says it's going. 10 years, 15, 50, 4, we don't know. But here's where Cryon says eventually it's going, is that you will have enclosed magnetic motors that turn by themselves because of this push and pull. They never stop. The only thing that's going to wear out are the bearings. The magnets won't ever wear out. Here they go, pushing and pulling, spinning, 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 spinning. That means you will have perpetual electric production all the time. And it doesn't require anything. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to give it fuel. It can be miniaturized. Eventually, Cryon says, how would you like to have all of your electronic devices never need a battery? Because they're always containing a miniaturized version of that production of electricity. How about an iPhone that you never have to plug in? How about a camera that never has to have a battery? It's the end of batteries. Well, people say, well, it's got to be stored somewhere. Even if you have this electricity production, like in a car, like a Tesla, it's got to be stored somewhere. You can't drive a car with just a little electric thing. And Christ says, stand by for something like film went away that you don't expect. He's called it something that actually has a name and is being called this now. It's the age of the supercap. Now, I'm not going to explain it, but capacitance is not storage, really. It's there and looks like it, but it's not. So it's a paradigm you don't expect. Can you imagine a Tesla without the battery? Can you imagine in the trunk of the Tesla a charger that is always running, even in the middle of the night? It's just always trickling. It's always going. And it does something with the supercap so that no matter what, no matter when, you've got a car that will go. And it will drive and drive and drive and drive and drive and drive, and you never have to plug it in. Does that sound entrancing? Does it sound like something you would think that might change the future? Oh boy. What about this? How about buildings that supply their own electricity that are off the grid? Wow. Are you interested yet? How about desalination of water, finally, seawater, that is without heat and without electricity doing it, and depends on magnetism, maybe a little electricity, but nothing like having to heat it and evaporate it. So that you could have, and here's Cryon is talking about real-time desalination where the water comes in and it goes out. Would that revolutionize anything? You know our cities, some of these cities we have are running out of water. It's true. I'm in California. We have that now. But luckily for us, we're on the ocean. The East Coast, luckily for them, they're on the ocean. We have our largest cities mainly on the ocean. Desalination. I love this idea. Cryon says you might be able to desalination with seawater, thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons, and you say, how do you get them to the other cities that are not on the coast? And Cryon and I loved it, and I got the visualization, through previous oil pipes. In other words, you're not going to need the oil anymore. So perhaps the infrastructure of the delivery of desalination water is already there. Okay, I know you're rolling your eyes and all these things, but this is the premise. When? When is this invention going to come? What I'm going to tell you next is very interesting, and Cryon has pointed it out. He says, when the inventions are ready, they don't just come one at a time. They will be multiple. In other words, it will be various systems using the same kind of philosophy all at once. Did you know that the Wright brothers, at the time the Wright brothers flew, that they only beat the French by 2 weeks? In other words, it was all over the planet. It was ready. We were ready for flight. How fast are we going in the development of technology and new things? It was John Peterson, again, showed that it goes like 10 times. Every time something happens like that, we have 10 times the space of the technology before it goes to another one, and there's 10 times. He's talking about inventions and how quick things go. Can I just give you a little vignette before I turn it over to Colin? My father, bless his soul, he's not with us anymore, died when he's 86, was born right before the Wright brothers flew. And he, of course, after he died, he had seen us go to the moon. Starting to get the picture? This is the beginning of something. And every single one of you who is an inventor, especially if you're in the new age, especially if you've been working on free energy or all of these things, I have news for you, because another paradigm may very well have moved off the peg. And that is this. Every time somebody wants me to see their free energy invention, and I'll go and I'll take a look at it, and they'll light a light bulb or something or whatever, or get it out of the air, I say, okay, when are you going to show this to anybody? When are we going to produce it? Oh, and they say, oh, no, it cannot be produced because somebody will steal it. So the paradigm is this. This can't happen because there's too much invested in the grid. This can't happen because there's too much invested in this and that. Therefore, it's not going to get to first base. Therefore, the government will steal it, industry will steal it, and you'll never see it happen. Get ready for something you didn't expect, and Colin is going to tell you all about these paradigm shifts, what is going on. I want to remind you of something. Flight. We started with propellers. You know this. And now we are in jet engines and all. So things happen gradually and in a way that is a hybrid of things. So when this all starts to happen, you're going to see the magnetics, the magnetic motors, all these things in a hybrid fashion before we go to the elegance that Cryon has described that I just gave you. Is it happening? Is it fantasy? Is it something that we're just dreaming about, or are we on the cusp of a revolution that's going to change the planet? I'm going to turn it over to Colin, and he's just going to give you the ABCs. Colin, what is going on? Is this real or not?
It is real. So first thing I want to say is last June, after we got going on this, my business partner and I, Justin Green, created Innovation T. And the reason for that was we saw that we could bring together technologies, already existing technologies and developing technologies around energy, water, and food that could not only take meet with what Cryon was talking about, but actually bring it to the world right now. And so I looked at three things. One was energy or electricity, water, so the quality of water, and then also food, because what is life without food? So I looked at all three of these things, and through you and I met in January of 2019 in Melbourne, Florida, talked about this. You made a couple introductions for me, and within a month and a half, I had not only met with the inventors and the engineers behind the technology I'm going to talk about now, but also vetted their solutions and understood the implications of what they developed. So the first thing we did was I went after met with the engineers behind the electricity production pieces. And what I found was that there was a group of engineers who over 15 years had developed magnetic micro wind turbines, magnetic motor generators, and amazing battery storage that they had actually used in the oil and gas and mining industries. So these devices, these technologies were built so that they could go into remote, harsh environments where reliability is paramount. So what I saw was that these guys had actually developed, and I'll just point to this a little bit, a micro wind turbine that could generate anywhere from kilowatts to hundreds of kilowatts of electricity in very small spaces, and I'll explain how that happens. They'd also developed magnetic motor generators that can produce from 20 kilowatts of electricity, which is enough to power a 5-bedroom home, all the way to 4.5 megawatts of electricity in a 2.5-foot space. That's stunning. And so the other aspect of this is that, yes, they are storing that electricity in batteries. And if you take a look at this picture here, you'll see my cell phone next to a battery that stores 20 kilowatts of electricity. That's pretty amazing because in that little space, they can actually store some pretty amazing amounts of electricity. What makes this really interesting and so compelling is how these technologies can get used. So with the micro wind turbines, the way they're actually using magnetics is through the use of magnets and coils within the devices themselves. So here's a little zoom in, a little close up of this wind turbine. And there are a couple of things that make this really compelling. One is that this particular device that you're looking at is 3 feet in diameter. It can produce just an amazing amount of electricity in a small space. It can produce electricity starting at winds of 2 miles per hour and can operate well in excess of 100 miles an hour. And that compares directly to the big 300-foot diameter wind turbines that you see on the water or in open areas. Those wind turbines can operate only between 17 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour. They can only start producing electricity at 17 miles an hour, and they have to turn off or be shut down at 30 miles an hour. Otherwise, they literally break apart. And these devices are very different in their design. So they spin very freely. There's almost no friction in the bearings or the, actually it has no bearings. It's almost a frictionless axle here. And the reason it can produce so much electricity in such a small space is that the magnets and the coils are at the outside of the blades. So as this thing spins, it is actually producing electricity outside as opposed to on the shaft. That is pretty amazing. And so what we're doing with this setup is actually using them on not only buildings. So this is about a 400,000 square foot building. This is a rendering. We're actually doing this same setup that I'll explain in a minute. We're doing this same setup on a building, a 400,000 square foot building in New York, which requires about a megawatt of electricity. And we are able to produce a megawatt of electricity. And so we can literally take that building off the grid. That's a lot of fun. But the other thing is we want to make these things portable so that we can, and this unit here is a portable power on demand unit is what we're calling it, where we can literally have a 3 foot diameter micro wind turbine on top of this on a telescoping pole that can go up to, I think, 20 feet and produce electricity that gets put into a magnetic motor generator here, as well as battery storage. And this can run 20 to 25 kilowatts of electricity an hour.
Colin, can I ask a question at this point in time?
Yes.
I'm going to ask a question of you right now. Are you going to? Is there any pushback from government, industry, anything? Are they out to get you because you have this, or is there something else you'd like to talk about?
Well, the answer to the question is no. And the first question is, are we, is there any impedance to us working on this? And the answer is no. And are they out to get us? No. What is actually happening is that not only are we working with energy companies, so there are energy companies that are very, very interested in this because they see the potential in the future, which is they know that the grid is fragile. They know that the way we're producing electricity right now is very inefficient. And for gas companies, for instance, they are looking at a decline in the use of natural gas over the years, and they're looking for alternatives for that. So we are actually getting a great deal of support from state government and city and county governments to actually implement this and work with the energy companies. And Lee, I just want to say something about this. I did a video recently. I did a lot of research recently about the inefficiencies of electricity production in this country. And what actually happens when we produce electricity at a natural gas, coal, nuclear, or oil-fired power plant is that within the plant itself, just based on thermodynamics of heat transfer, we lose about 65% of the energy of that lump of coal or cubic foot of natural gas just in the production of the electricity before it gets on the grid. So in the plant, it's 65% of that electricity or that energy is not converted into electricity. And then through transmission and distribution, we lose another 5 to 6%. And then with phantom energy or phantom energy loss in buildings, homes, factories, where things are left plugged in and turned on, we lose another between 12 and 23% of electricity. So all in, when we produce electricity from those sources, whether it's natural gas, coal, uranium, or oil, we essentially lose 75% of the energy of that natural resource before it gets to a wall outlet. So what we're able to do with this is actually, by producing electricity at the point of usage, we eliminate all that waste. We are generating electricity from wind and from magnetics right now, and we can produce in very small spaces, we can produce more than sufficient amounts of electricity for buildings, homes, communities, all in small space.
Are these, I'm sorry to interrupt, I'm probably going to get ahead of you. Is this working anywhere? Is this being installed anywhere? Or what's going on right now that we can say, is this real?
Yes. Thank you. That's a great question. So the answer is yes, it's real. These units themselves have been in production and in use for 15 years. They've been constantly refined and developed, and they've been done in relatively small quantities. Over the next 4 or 5 months, however, because of what I'm doing, because of what my partner and I are doing at Innovation T, we will have at least 800 units of varying sizes, ranging from these smaller units with the 3-foot diameter wind turbines and the battery storage. We will all the way to 250 kilowatt setups where we can put them in arrays and have them as multi-megawatt systems. We'll have 800 of these units in the marketplace in the next 4 to 5 months. Installed, not sitting in a warehouse, but installed on buildings.
Are there any major cities where this is happening?
Yes. So we are doing a lot right now in Pittsburgh, in Buffalo, where very interestingly, there's a lot going on in Buffalo, New York, around energy. We're doing things in Buffalo. We have things going on in New York City, and very soon it will be Boston and Nantucket Island. So that's where we are focusing our attention right now.
Now, there's some other things we're looking at that I see are not wind. There's some, you mentioned them, but tell people what else we're seeing on the screen there.
These magnetic motor generators, yes?
Right. Okay.
So these magnetic motor generators are pretty amazing. This unit here on the lower left-hand corner is a 25 kilowatt unit. You can see the cell phone next to it. This is essentially 3 cubic feet of space, and it will produce 20 to 25 kilowatts of electricity. This unit with the blue and orange, this is a unit that can produce anywhere from 150 kilowatts to 4.5 megawatts of electricity. And that space of 2.5, these blue things, which are magnetic disks, that's about 2.5 feet long. So being able to do that amount of electricity in that size space is pretty amazing. And in a minute, I'll talk a little bit about what that implies for in terms of number of homes in that space. But the other thing here is around the batteries themselves. So right now, there is battery storage. And the purpose of that is so that the micro wind turbines and the magnetic motor generators are constantly feeding the batteries. And those batteries provide really pure electricity to whatever's being used. So, or whatever's drawing on the batteries themselves. That's actually really important, because when you have, whether it's your home appliances, whether it's factories or offices, when you have equipment drawing electricity, you want it to be as pure and consistent as possible. And one of the problems with the way we produce and deliver electricity now is that you get spikes, you get ups and downs in not only the voltage, but the quality of the electricity itself. And so machines suffer because of that. And machines and electronics suffer. And also, as a consumer, we pay for everything that's delivered, whether it's usable or not. So what we're saying is, and we're able to do, is we can actually provide consistent, pure electricity that is exactly what's expected by the devices that's using it, which also means that we don't need to produce as much relative to a power plant. We don't need to produce as much to power the equipment that is using the electricity.
So I just want to review and the summary to some of the viewers and listeners here, because they heard what I said earlier, and not everybody hears the same way. This is the first step to where we're going to go. And so, yes, there are batteries now and all these things. Do you remember seeing pictures of, if you're a young person, our first computers? And they would fill a building, and now you can have the same thing in your watch. You see where this is going. So what we're looking at is the infancy of the use of magnetics in the production of electricity. And right now you're seeing it hooked to the things that we know, whether it's to start it with an engine or with a turbine or any of these things, and to store it in a battery. That is the first step. Let's see how quickly we will go to some of the other things that Cryan said will be the natural evolution of this. Colin, do you have anybody in that think tank that you're working with in the back rooms working on some of the things that Cryan actually said, which would be a self-contained motor that spins by itself?
Well, we actually do. And so there are a couple of things about this. One is that, when I heard the Cryan talk about the coming cold age, I wanted to be able to solve that problem, or find a solution to that problem, because when it gets cold, and it will, people like to be comfortable. So being able to take care of heating and electricity for homes, offices, buildings, factories was the first direction. And fortunately, the technology was there. The engineers behind the magnetics on these technologies are very smart, and they are already looking at the miniaturization of that technology. So, it's a combination of what do we do and what problems do we solve. So there are the engineers who are working on this, but then there are also other inventors who have come through you, who are working on the miniaturization piece. And I'm working with one in particular who is very far along with the miniaturization of a magnetic motor. A magnetic motor that could fit in a cell phone.
You're very close to one of the other predictions of Cryan, just right now, just as it stands, where he said that neighborhoods will have clusters of homes on one unit. And so if something happened in the coming cold where there was a destruction of a neighborhood or whatever, and they could always go to a neighbor's and they would have electricity, whereas in the way we are right now, when the grid goes down, it goes down. And it's going to go down for a city or for blocks and blocks, whereas what Cryan's prediction was, you can have a unit that simply goes and powers 5, 6, 7 homes. And to hear you say that exists and that is happening and is literally there.
Well, it's even better than that. It's even better than 5 or 6 homes. It is in 1,500 square feet. We can power, 1,500 square feet is not a lot of space. We can power 815 homes. And working with Eaton Corporation, for instance, that actually builds and designs smart substations, we can put a 1 megawatt unit in a local community with a distribution capability to all those homes. But those substations can actually link to other substations so that, as you just described, no one goes down. If one area has problems, other areas can feed into that.
I love it.
So I just put up some numbers here so you can see the impact of what we're doing. So within 1,500 square feet, we can produce a megawatt of electricity. That can power 815 homes. Within an acre, we can generate 30 megawatts, which can power 150,000 square homes. And I just want to put that in the perspective of how much electricity and how much land does a solar farm require and produce? So a solar farm, a solar farm can produce a megawatt of electricity, but it requires 4.5 to 7 acres of land. And what we're saying, and so if 7 acres of land can power 815 homes, what we're saying is we can power 150,000 homes in less than that space.
Just so people understand, this is the terminology that you're using. Solar farm has nothing to do with a farm. It's a solar array. And
Yes,
we're going to talk about farming in just a minute.
Yeah. So it's pretty amazing. The density of the energy, the electricity that we're able to produce. And this is just the beginning. This stuff just keeps getting better and better in terms of being able to produce more in smaller spaces.
I love it. Are you at this point ready to move on to the next one, or to finish the electricity part?
No, I'm done with the electricity part. So what I wanted to talk about now was water and desalination. So in my travels through your introductions, I met an inventor who had developed a device that's used in irrigation wells. And essentially what he's doing is using some pretty advanced physics to introduce negative ions into water. And because of that, and he can do it in pretty large volumes of water too. So by producing this, changing the solubility of the water molecule, he can actually produce really clear, pure H2O. And there are a couple things that happens with this. One is the solubility essentially drops any pollutants or anything that wants to attach to the water molecule. And then the second is that plants just love this stuff. And so the result of what he's been able to do is to take, and the picture I have up here is side-by-side plots in a test bed in Arizona, side-by-side plots where on the left-hand side, it was an untreated plot, the same seeds on both sides. And on the right-hand side where it says treated plot, it was the result of using this water. And essentially what they were able to do was increase crop yields by 6 to 10 times.
Can I just interrupt right now, because there's people who are going to look at this and say, okay, they're altering something here. They're doing something that nature wouldn't do. The genomes, all of this stuff that we're hearing now. All we're doing is making the water clearer and purer for the plants. Isn't that right?
That's right. So there was no fertilizers. There was no modification of the seeds. It was completely organic growth. And all that changed was the water that was used on either side. So I got really excited about this because of the next thing. And so right now this is geared toward irrigation wells. The next iteration of this technology will be a much more thorough desalination of water. So right now this actually desalinates brackish water. So water that's near the coast, inland but near the coast. And the next iteration of this will include magnetics and also be able to desalinate ocean water. It'll be able to desalinate ocean water into irrigation water. And then after that, we'll get to drinkable water for, us and animals. So that's really important because of what I also saw in the Cryon channels, which is that as we continue to, as we work towards this cold period and people need to consolidate their growing, less and less farmland will be available because of the cold itself. We need to look at ways of actually producing food, whether it's microgreens, berries, legumes. We need to be able to produce these things in smaller and smaller spaces. And right now, there are companies that make vertical farms, shipping container farms. And what's amazing about these is that in the space of about 400 square feet, which is a 40-foot shipping container, in the space of 400 square feet, they can produce as much produce. They can produce as much crops, or whether it's greens or berries or legumes, they can produce as much as 2.5 to 5 acres of land. So 400 square feet produces as much as 2.5 to 5 acres of land. And the challenge, part of the challenge for these is that they require a lot of electricity to power the lights and keep the climate conducive and optimal for growth. So what we've done is start to marry the electricity production capabilities from the micro wind turbines and the magnetic motor generators and the batteries. We're marrying that to these shipping container farms. And you can see down in the lower left-hand corner here, there's a production facility in Buffalo where they're producing these things. We're actually combining our electricity onto that, and where it's needed, we can actually attach the water filtration, the water purification stuff as well. And I just want to put this in perspective a little bit, because being able to produce more in smaller spaces where you have completely organic growth, farming is going to be increasingly important. And so you can see some of what I've done here. So if we're looking at a 400,000 square foot shipping container, and a square foot of, or an acre of land equals 43,500 square feet, we can essentially put 109 shipping containers in 1 acre of land. And if we put 109 shipping containers in 1 acre of land, and it can produce as much as 2.5 acres per shipping container, we're essentially, in 1 acre, we're producing as much food as 272 acres of traditional farming. Or if we're producing crops that are at the scale of 5 acres of land per 1 shipping container, we're actually replacing 544 acres of traditional farming land with 1 acre of shipping container farms. So that becomes important because, again, as it gets colder and we need to have higher density of quality food in a smaller space, we can actually do that in acres. We can feed whole communities or whole counties very easily. Not only does this produce food, but it also produces jobs, because each one of these shipping containers requires 5 to 7 people to run and maintain. So there's a lot to be said for this. And not only is it higher density of high quality organic foods, but this is truly farm to table, because you can have this right in the middle of a neighborhood, you can have it in the middle of a community, and whether it's the grocery stores, whether it's restaurants, whether it's hotels and other places that require a constant stream of food, you can literally have this right next door, which means you're getting super fresh foods delivered to your door.
This is amazing. Now, if you haven't figured it out, listener, if you haven't really put 2 and 2 together, we're looking at right now these things are how they're going to improve our cities and all like that. Can you think for a moment what it will do for the third world? To be able to generate electricity like this in a very small footprint in order to grow food in a very small footprint, that is going to change continents. This is what we're talking about. This also leads into what Kryon has talked about, the future of Africa. This all ties together in maybe a distant future, maybe in decades, but you'll be here and you're going to see it. Colin, there are a lot of excited people here who perhaps have inventions. Are you available to take a look or any of these things?
I am. I'm very happy to. And in answering that question, I also just want to address what you just said about developing countries and Africa. We are already doing projects in Africa around electricity, and the interest in the electricity is foremost, but following quickly on that is water purification and food production. So not only Africa, but also in Mexico, and we're working with a group in Mexico that we're looking to really expand into southern Mexico, where the grid is not as developed as in northern Mexico, and food production needs to be increased. So it's already happening. And yes, I am interested in speaking with inventors and people who are on the cutting edge of stuff, because it's a matter of incorporating it into what we're doing and bringing it out into the world in a much bigger way.
What awesome information this has been. There's more. And again, I want to keep I want to keep from getting too scientific and having your eyes glaze over, because of what I also know that Colin has told me, that either is not for publication yet or is a little too technical. This is extremely exciting. You've seen the tip of the iceberg, perhaps, of what is going on. I love it that Colin is available here to take a look at other things you might have. This is the connection that we have always wanted. And that is it real? Yes, it is. Is it funding? A bit fundable? Yes, it is. These kinds of things is where Colin is kind of the crossroads for this, to take a look at some of the things that are going on. And this is what has happened to him through synchronicity, is that people have been brought to him and inventions have been brought to him. So he's a busy guy, as you might imagine, and this particular video is going to, I know, go a lot of places. But even still, he has given permission to show his website. It's on the screen. When we come back to him, you're going to see it. I'll give you the last word, my friend.
Well, I have to thank you, Lee, for not only doing what you're doing in channeling Cryon and bringing that information to the world, but also for your connections and introductions for me. I mean, I look at myself as a facilitator. I'm not the inventor. I'm not the engineer. I'm just helping bring this together and bring it to the world in a really big way. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me do this show with you.
This is going to stir the pot, my friend.
Good.
See. And thank you so much. I know perhaps we'll be together again when you've got some more things to show and tell, but this is enough for now. This has been Lee Carroll, Streaming with Lee, Colin McLive. The future is here. Thank you.